Good morning to everyone. My name is Valentina Cantone and I teach early Islamic art and architecture. For this short lecture about Islamic art, I have decided to talk about one idea in a single case study. And the title of my presentation is Islamic Paintings to Glorify the Western King, the Cappella Palatina in Palermo, 1143, a case of Mediterraneanism. What about this strange word? Well, this term was introduced in 2012 in a paper of Miriam Rosser-Owen, a curator of the collection of Islamic art in the Victoria and Albert Museum of London. In this paper, Miriam Rosser-Owen discuss this epistemological approach to Islamic art, defining the medieval art as a complex mixture of the different cultures diffused all around the Mediterranean Sea. Underlining the importance of the knowledge of all these different cultures and the relations among them from the different side of the Mediterranean. Well, to test this approach to Islamic art and to medieval art in general, we can talk about this case study, the Cappella Palatina in Palermo, which is, in my opinion, the best example to demonstrate this idea. In the left side of this slide, you can see the plan of this church, this Cappella Palatina. As you can see by the plan, the church is a normal Romanesque architecture with 3 naves open to an atrium on the western side of the architecture, and on the eastern side of the architecture there is a choir raised by the planking level of the naves, because there is an underlying crypt. The 3 naves correspond to the 3 apses, and there is also a dome in the center of the choir. In the larger picture, you can see that all the surfaces of this architecture are covered by gilded mosaic realized by Byzantine mosaicists called by Roger II to glorify the heavenly King, God or Christ, and at the same time to glorify himself, the earthly King, who was seated in the middle of the choir while he was listening to the liturgy, which was a Latin liturgy. So we can see in this church the Latin Romanesque tradition with the adoption of the Byzantine most famous technique, the mosaic, with a gilded background, reinvented, rearranged to be adapted to this architecture, which is totally different from the standard or the most diffused kind of Byzantine church, of course. So the 2 souls, these 2 cultures are used all together to invent a new original chapel. And these two souls are held in the book, in the open book, in the hand of Christ, because we have the same quote of John in Greek and in Latin. Irene imin, the peace is with you. Eroi to phos to cosmu. I am the light of the world. O akoluthonemi, umi peripathesi and phiskotia, who follow me, not walk in darkness. Alexi to phos tisois, but shall have the light of life, which is the eternal life, of course. So Latin culture, Greek culture, Latin liturgy, Greek inscriptions, all together in this totally new arrangement. What about the Islamic part? Well, the Islamic part dominates all this church because the ceiling of the central nave is realized with a wooden covering done by an Egyptian atelier called by Roger II to celebrate with a profane cycle the royal daily life of his court. Technically speaking, this covering is called mukarnas with an Arab word. Mukarnas is a geometrical arrangement of elements in form of stalactite with various geometrical sections. Normally, this kind of ceiling is used to cover the concave part of niches and the barrel vault, like in this case, and can be realized with different materials, wood, like in this case, or rock, stucco, and bricks. But for us, one of the most important part of this covering is the painted cycle, which is realized by Kufic inscriptions or Arab short sentences to glorify the king, and before the king, the caliph, because this kind of formulary is very spread in all the Mediterranean context in the Islamic world, in monumental art and also in objects, and also figures. But first of all, give a look to the inscriptions. The inscriptions are a little bit funny because they are all reserved to the good omen for the king. Beatitude, beatitude, and beatitude, or perfection, perfection, a perfection. And in this way, the inscription is completely mixed with perfection, perfection in the complete covering of all the surface with the figures. The figures are chosen by a profane repertory to celebrate the royal court. But these figures are very traditional in Islamic art to celebrate the caliph normally, or the emirs. For example, you can see in the left part of this slide a female musician who is playing a psalter, or in the other side, two chess players inside a pavilion, or the servant, because it is celebrated also the daily life of all the elements who participate to the courtly life. The servants in this case who are taking the water from this monumental well under a pergola, or also some figure taken by the literary sources. For example, Rukuk. Rukuk is a giant bird who has in Indian or in Iranian origin, we really don't know exactly, who is transporting a passenger. But we have also some Christian iconography, like in this case. This knight is using a spear to kill a dragon. And as you can see, he has also an halo around the head, and probably he represents or Saint Theodore or Saint George. And it attests the suggestion received by the Islamic atelier from some Christian official or erudite from the court of the Norman king. So, summarizing, can we talk about Mediterraneanism? Yes, of course we can. The Cappella Palatina in Palermo is an example of original synthesis among all the different traditions tested all around the Mediterranean in the 12th century. Latin art, Greek art, Islamic art, all together used to glorify the King Roger II, who conquered the island in the middle of the Mediterranean because of its strategic placement for trading and military campaigns, as understood before him by Byzantine emperors and Islamic emirs. With this, I have finished my short lesson. Thank you for your attention, and remember to enjoy Islamic art.